And welcome everybody to another edition of the Brody File. Look where we have wound up. We're in the Low Country, Charleston, South Carolina. Boy, is this state beautiful, and it really is extremely important politically. We've been through Iowa, we've been through New Hampshire, and now it's South Carolina's turn, and they have a major decision on their hands. More on that in a moment, but let's talk a little bit about the importance of this state. Look, since 1890, this state has picked the winner of the actual eventual nominee, the eventual Republican nominee, in every single contest except last time around, actually. Newt Gingrich won here in South Carolina, but Mitt Romney was the nominee. Boy, these candidates have been all over the place. They've been upstate in Greenville, through Columbia in the Midlands, and then of course here in Charleston in the Low Country, even Myrtle Beach and all those folks up in the PD. And so this state has a lot to offer. You know, Ted Cruz, we've been here to cover him. We've covered Rubio as well, and Donald Trump, all of them. We want you to get a sampling of some of what we have seen on the stump. Let's begin with Ted Cruz.
All across South Carolina, all across this country, people are waking up. You know, when we launched the campaign, March 23rd at Liberty University, the New York Times promptly opined, Cruz cannot win because the Washington elites despise him. I kind of thought that was the whole point of the campaign. Listen, if you think things are going great in Washington, that we need to keep headed in the same basic direction, just kind of fiddle around the edges, then I ain't your guy. On the other hand, if you think Washington is fundamentally broken, that there is a bipartisan corruption of career politicians in both parties that get in bed with the lobbyists and special interests and grow and grow and grow government, and we need to take power out of Washington and back to we the people. That is what this campaign is all about.
As for Donald Trump, well, what do you expect? His rallies, they're huge. I mean, they're the best. They're terrific. I mean, he would be the first to say it. Believe me, he'd be the first to say it. Anyhow, here's some of what he had to say in South Carolina. He was giving the audience quite a bit of Southern comfort.
You know, I never realized, I've always known politicians are dishonest, but I've never known the level of dishonesty. And I deal in industries, a lot of different, but mostly real estate, and like in Manhattan and different places. But I've never seen people as dishonest as politicians. They will say anything. And this guy, Ted Cruz, gets up and says, Donald Trump does not respect the Second Amendment. I mean, more than anybody, I'm with the Second Amendment. No, it's lies. And then they do commercials. And you know, he did it to Ben Carson, and him in particular. In all fairness, Jeb misrepresents, but these are minor misrepresentations, and he's not going anywhere anyway, so who cares, right?
And then, of course, our good friend, the good doctor, Dr. Ben Carson. He's been all over the state as well. You know, he went to Bob Jones University upstate near Greenville there, or actually in Greenville. And we have some of that we want to play for you. And he's always so smart and eloquent when he talks. I want you to hear some of this.
The secular progressive movement is very dangerous in this country. And they actually are the minority, but they're driving the boat because they really don't care whether you agree with them or not, as long as you sit down and keep your mouth shut. And it's time for us to stand up and open our mouths.
You know, South Carolina has not just been a place for the candidates to come and give their stump speeches. There have been quite a few debates here, actually two real important ones. Some highlights to take a look at.
Jeb is so wrong. Jeb is absolutely so. That's just so you understand. You know what that is? That's Jeb's special interest and lobbyists talking. Look, let me just tell you something. Jeb is so wrong. You got to fight ISIS first. You fight ISIS first. Right now you have Russia, you have Iran, you have them with Assad, and you have them with Syria. You have to knock out ISIS. They're chopping off heads. These are animals. You have to knock them out. You have to knock them off strong. You decide what to do after. You can't fight two wars at one time. If you listen to him and you listen to some of the folks that I've been listening to, that's why we've been in the Middle East for 15 years and we haven't won anything. We've spent $5 trillion in the Middle East because of thinking like that. We've spent and Lindsey Graham, who backs him, who had 0 on his polls. So let me just tell you something. We've spent. I only tell the truth, lobbyists. We've spent $5 trillion all over the middle. We have to rebuild our country. We have to rebuild our infrastructure. You listen to that, you're going to be there for another 15 years.
All right, Governor Bush, please respond.
So the very basic fact is that Vladimir Putin is not going to be an ally of the United States. The whole world knows this. It's a simple, basic fact. They're not taking out, they're not even attempting to take out ISIS. They're attacking the troops that we're supporting. We need to create a coalition, Sunni-led coalition, on the ground with our special operators to destroy ISIS and bring about stability. And you can't do that with Assad in power.
We're supporting troops that we don't even know who they are. We're supporting troops that we don't even know who they are.
All right.
We have no idea who they are.
Gentlemen, I think we're gonna leave that there. I've got a question
from a guy
for Senator.
who gets his foreign policy from the shows.
Oh, yeah,
This is a guy who thinks that Hillary Clinton was a great negotiator in Iran. We're living in dangerous times.
In New Hampshire.
This is a man who insults his way to the nomination.
24 million.
All right, ladies. All right.
Give me a break.
I like Donald. He is an amazing entertainer. But his policies for most of his life...
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
For most of his life, his policies have been very, very liberal. For most of his life, he has described himself as very pro-choice and as a supporter of partial birth abortion. Right now, today, as a candidate, he supports federal taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. I disagree with him on that. That's a matter of principle, and I'll tell you...
You are the single biggest liar. You probably are worse than Jeb Bush. You are the single biggest liar.
All right.
This guy lied. Let me just tell you. This guy lied about Ben Carson when he took votes away from Ben Carson in Iowa, and he just continues. And today, we had robocalls saying Donald Trump is not going to run in South Carolina, where I'm leading by a lot. I'm not going to run. Vote for Ted Cruz. This is the same thing he did to Ben Carson. This guy will say anything. Nasty guy. Now I know why he doesn't have one endorsement from any of his colleagues.
All right, John, I get
Senator
to
Cruz, pick
respond.
from the buffet there.
He's a nasty guy.
I will say... I will say it is fairly remarkable to see Donald defending Ben after he called him pathological and compared him to a child molester, both of which were offensive and wrong. But let me say more broadly, you notice Donald didn't disagree with the substance, that he supports taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. And Donald has this weird pattern. When you point to his own record, he screams, liar, liar, liar. If you want to go...
Where did I support it? Where did I support it? Hey, Ted, where did I support it?
If you want to go and watch the video, go to our website,
hey,
tedcruz.org.
Where did I support it, Ted?
Out of Donald's own mouth.
Where did I support it?
You supported it when we were battling over defunding Planned Parenthood. You went on television and said Planned Parenthood does wonderful things and we should not defund
it. It does do wonderful things, but not as it relates to abortion.
So tell me, what are the wonderful things? What are the wonderful things it does?
There are wonderful things having to do with women's health.
Some of the highlights of the debates here in South Carolina. All right, when we come back from the Low Country here in Charleston, South Carolina, Nikki Haley, the governor. A lot of folks love her, though she said some controversial things that have got the party, the Republicans, in a bit of an uproar. More on that in a moment. And welcome back, everybody, to the Brody File here in the Low Country. Beautiful, and marshes, and I don't know what else is down here. Robin, Mazik?
We got live oak trees.
Live oak trees.
Spanish moss.
The Spanish moss. I don't know these terms down here. I'm from New York. I don't know any of this. Anyhow, beautiful country down here in Charleston. Can I say Charleston? Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina. Boy, I tell you what, look, she's had an interesting timeline in all this. You know, she started out as like this Tea Party darling, and then she became governor of the state, and, you know, she was, the conservatives loved her, and then she had the State of the Union situation where she kind of took Donald Trump to task about some of the anger coming from the Republican Party, and there have been a few other things along the road. Let's hear a little bit of what Nikki Haley had to say during that State of the Union speech.
In many parts of society today, whether in popular culture, academia, the media, or politics, there's a tendency to falsely equate noise with results. Some people think that you have to be the loudest voice in the room to make a difference. That's just not true. Often the best thing we can do is turn down the volume. When the sound is quieter, you can actually hear what someone else is saying. And that can make a world of difference.
Nikki Haley with some pretty strong words, and of course Donald Trump did not take too kindly to those words, and it all leads to a Brody File commentary. Well, look, some of the comments coming from Nikki Haley really do represent the struggle within the Republican Party. I mean, Nikki Haley, there's no question about it that you can make the case that she is a conservative governor. I don't think there's any question about that. However, she's also a politician, and she's playing the game. And there's a game to be played there, and that's why Donald Trump is doing so well, because he's not playing the same politician game, and Nikki Haley clearly is. And so I think that's rubbed some conservatives, not just in South Carolina, but nationally, the wrong way. And so you have Rush Limbaugh, you have Sean Hannity, you have Eric Erickson, you have a lot of other folks that have not been too happy with her. And really, what it ends up becoming is somewhat of a symptomatic, if you will, of what the party is struggling through right now. What are they exactly? Should they be fire and brimstone on certain issues, whether it be immigration and some others, or do they need to have more of a big tent, all-inclusive response? And Nikki Haley seems to be suggesting that there needs to be more of that all-inclusive big tent philosophy, but where has it really gotten the Republican Party, not just as of late, but really throughout the last few decades? And so it remains to be seen what's going to happen in the future. All right, when we roll on from the low country, a big issue in South Carolina and quite frankly nationally, those Planned Parenthood videos and the defunding of Planned Parenthood. Ted Cruz has a few things to say about that when we come back. And welcome back, everybody, to Charleston, South Carolina, the low country. We love it down here. I mean, it's beautiful. It's the winter, but it's Charleston, so it's not New York, if you know what I'm saying. It's not that blistery cold. It's beautiful down here. We love it. Ted Cruz and Planned Parenthood. He goes around the country and talks quite a bit, actually, about defunding Planned Parenthood if he was president of the United States. And there are other candidates that do the same thing. But Ted Cruz has quite a swagger when he says it. Have a look.
The second thing I intend to do on the first day in office is instruct the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and these horrible videos. The administration of justice should be blind to party or ideology. The only fidelity at the Department of Justice should be to the laws and the Constitution of the United States.
Well, obviously, Ted Cruz knows how important it is to talk about defunding Planned Parenthood, and many of the other Republican candidates feel the same way. Marjorie Dannenfelser is president of the SBA list. That's the Susan B. Anthony list, a big pro-life group in Washington, D.C., and she's leading the fight. She really is around the country to make sure that this issue of Planned Parenthood and defunding the pro-abortion organization is a top priority for these Republican candidates.
There's really contrast between every single one of these candidates and Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, whoever gets it on that side. It really is coming apart on the Democratic side. The fabric of their whole actual movement is really starting to come apart at the seams, and you can tell that because Nancy Pelosi is under fire from NARAL and the abortion movement. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the Democratic Party, is under fire. Why? Well, Debbie Wasserman Schultz made the mistake of telling the truth. She said the problem with our movement is that it's lacking the energy of youth, that the youth are complacent. So she gets attacked for telling the truth there. It's very interesting that in a Washington Post interview with Nancy Pelosi, she had the nerve to say that she was not for abortion on demand and she's not for abortion as birth control. Now, we know what her views are. We've seen a consistent voting record as a self-professed Catholic. She's voted consistently against her purported moral beliefs, but she knows what she should be saying. I think that's really important. She should be saying, I'm against these things. It's really a time of great optimism. The other thing that I would add is that the pain-capable bill, stopping abortion after 5 months, is supported by all of those candidates without question, all of the Republican candidates without exception, and without exception on the other side, Clinton and Bernie Sanders and in the entire Democratic Party and movement is against any restriction whatsoever. They are really on the wrong side of history, and they have everything to lose. Pro-life movement has everything to gain.
What about whoever wins this Republican nomination? There's going to be, or at least in the past, there's been the tendency to say, okay, let's move to the middle. Let's not deal with either they call it the war on women, which we know is junk. But what do you say to these Republican candidates who may think that they have to kind of come to the middle and talk a little bit more moderately about this issue?
Well, I think that one thing that we've seen is that the headwinds moving into the election are very, very strong in terms of Republicans going on offense. But you're 100% right that when almost the rule of politics is always once you get to the general, the language starts to tone down. And that's to be expected. However, there is no reason whatsoever to in any way slacken the pro-life positions that any of these candidates have taken. So that'll be really up to us also to continue to have our message continue from the grassroots, when speaking on the media, helping them, supporting them when they say good things, and then maybe in a good friendship coming around them and saying, we think you could be a little bit stronger when they're not being as strong as they can.
Marjorie Dannensfelser here on the Brody File. All right, when we come back, real interesting story. Great guy down here in South Carolina, Chad Connolly, the former head of the Republican Party here in South Carolina, now doing big things for the Republican National Committee when it comes to evangelical voter outreach. Back with his story. It's a compelling one in a moment. And welcome back, everybody, to the Brody File. We're here in Charleston, the Low Country. We love it down here. We're never coming back, just so you know. Hey, look, Chad Connolly, the former Republican chair of the South Carolina Republican Party down here, great guy. He is now in charge of evangelical outreach for the Republican National Committee in Washington. I had a chance to interview him a couple years ago. We want to bring some of that back. It's part of our Brody File Archive series.
I think the party has had a credibility problem. It's not anybody's fault. It's part of politics. People don't like it. I'm on the deacon board, have been on the deacon board in my church. It's really no different. But there's they want to label everything as this or that or a political party. So I had to build some credibility and authenticity. Reince Priebus is the deal. I left the chairmanship of South Carolina because I believe in Chairman Priebus. I think he's got a vision for this. I think the all hands on deck thing is a big deal. I think that's the right approach. I think the conservative faith-based message works. I think people understand it. I think when you build relationships and communicate that, people like it and they want to be a part of that. And so I've traveled all over the country, just meeting with faith leaders, pastors, priests, you name it, in every setting where people would stand still. I've spoken to over 15,000 pastors now, as bigger groups as 2,500, and then of course a lot of one-on-ones. A couple levels. The first thing after that authenticity is our people, David, have been talked out of the arena. I'll give you this example. I really think the left, and maybe particularly the media, has been really good at saying, you Christians, boy, y'all do evangelism and missions, and my kids love that vacation Bible school, but you shouldn't be involved in politics or education. That would be a violation of the separation of church and state. And we get on our meek, turn the other cheek, Jesus,
right.
And we're good at it. And I think we're at a time in our nation's history that we better find our turn the tables over Jesus. If we're not righteously indignant and involved and engaged, I don't know where we're going to go from here. And so I tell pastors, we've worked hard to avoid policy for years. Policy's not avoiding us. And it's coming to the pulpit. And if there's no freedom of speech in the pulpit, there's no freedom of speech anywhere. And I think because they've been pushed out of the arena, they think I don't need to go vote. So I started researching those numbers from George Barna. Around 89 million people that would identify as born again or evangelical. 30.5 million of those voted in 2012. That means 60 million people who believe in the Bible and they believe in core values didn't even bother to vote. So they've been told that's political. In my Sunday school class for years, I've taught on biblical worldview, just the stuff that really changed my life. Dr. Noble's book, Understanding the Times, and Dr. LaHaye's book, Mind Siege, and boy, just really told me it's not Chad's view or David's view. What's God got to say about this? And so in God's worldview, voting's not political, it's spiritual. Registration to vote's not political, it's spiritual. Our voting is a witness and a testimony to the community of what we believe in. And that's how we get elected officials who reflect what we believe in. If there's 60 million of us not even voting, no wonder we're in a mess.
What about the argument, there are a lot of evangelicals that say, okay, the Democrats are off the reservation when it comes to social issues, but the Republicans, we hear this talk now, all of a sudden, the media says a lot of this, the inclusion, we got to be more inclusive, and that's, that's a toxic word for evangelicals. So what are you hearing around the country? Are people concerned that the Republicans are going to start to look at these polls like on same-sex marriage and go, you know what, politically, that's not a winner for us, so we'll ditch the issue?
Think about this. Chairman Priebus hired somebody to just go out and talk about this. The Republican Party is the natural home for people of faith. One of my most proud moments as a chairman was getting to put in the most pro-faith, pro-family, best platform ever put in Republican Party or political party history down in Tampa in 2012. We have nothing to be ashamed of. This is the place where God's got a home. We watch the other party boo God out of their convention pretty much. You're never going to make everybody agree. I got a wife and 4 kids. I can't get them to agree on a Whopper and a Big Mac. I've been in deacon meetings for years. I can't get deacons in my little First Baptist church to agree on everything. We're never going to find somebody who's 1,000,000% with us on everything. But I believe our ideas and conservative values and faith-based values, I believe those resonate with people. I believe they resonate with voters. I think they make sense to them, and I think that's why we're attractive. Maybe we haven't done a very good job of getting that message out there. It's part of what I told Rights. Rights, let me go talk to the churches. I don't, it doesn't matter where they live, where they're from, what they look like. If they've got a biblical basis, a biblical worldview, if they say they agree in that same Bible that I read every day, then I'm going to go talk to them, because those are our voters, and they ought to be voting, and they ought to be voting their values.
Chad Connolly, great guy, compelling story. You can read more about it on thebrodyfile.com. That's the plug. We had to do the plug. Back in a moment. And welcome back, everybody, to the show. Look, before we leave you, we want to tell you a little bit of what's next. What comes after South Carolina? Well, there's quite a bit that comes after South Carolina. March 1st. Huge day in American politics. They're calling it the SEC, the Southeastern Conference Primary Day, and that's because 12 states are going to vote on that day, many of them here in the South. After that, it's on to Florida, about 10 days, about 2 weeks later or so. And we, at that point, should have a real good sense of what's going on, or maybe what's not going on. Who knows what's going on in this race at this point. It's given us a headache, and we've had to take Excedrin quite a bit. Anyhow, we appreciate you joining us here on the Brody File. We've had shrimp, Robin. We've had grits. We've gained a lot of weight. We have a lot of sweet tea as well. So thanks again. We'll see you next time on the road. Brody File. Have a good one.